Part 1. They called Lila, too wild to wed, the way people name a storm, half in fear, half in awe. It wasn't something she chose, not at first. The name clung to her over the years, passed from porch to porch, from the barber's chair to the church steps, until it felt heavier than her own skin. Lila heard it in the way voices lowered when she walked past, in the way mothers pulled their sons a little closer, as if wildness were catching. She didn't argue anymore. If the town needed her to be a warning, she'd give them one worth remembering. She lived at the edge of town in a weather-beaten shack that had once been a line camp, its boards silvered by sun and wind. At dawn, while the town still slept, she rode. No saddle most days, just her and her horse, Dust, moving as one across the open land. The cold bit her cheeks, the wind tore at her hair, and for those quiet miles, she belonged to nothing and no one. Freedom tasted like dry air and horse sweat, and Lila drank it deep. In town, she worked when she felt like it, hauling supplies, breaking horses others were afraid of, doing the hard jobs that left men sore and silent by nightfall. She laughed loud in the saloon, a sharp, bright sound that cut through smoke and music. She drank slowly, eyes alert, daring anyone to underestimate her. Men looked, always looked, but most never crossed the room. Those who did learned quickly that Lila didn't bow, didn't flutter, didn't soften herself to fit their expectations. They wanted tame. She was not. So when Caleb Hart rode into town, he was just another stranger at first. Another well-dressed man with a fine horse and clean hands, someone passing through or buying up land before moving on. The town noticed him right away. His horse was too expensive, his coat too well kept, his posture too sure. Whispers followed him like dust trails. Rich, educated back east, here to expand his holdings. Some said he'd buy half the valley before winter. Lila noticed him too, though she pretended not to. She felt his gaze before she saw it, steady and unhurried, not sliding away when she looked back. He stood near the hitching post as she swung down from Dust, boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. She expected judgment, or hunger, or that familiar measuring look. Instead, there was curiosity. Real curiosity. It unsettled her more than scorn ever had. Caleb Hart didn't speak to her that day. He watched as she tightened Dust's reins, as she brushed past townsfolk who stiffened at her nearness. His eyes followed her like he was studying a horizon, not a spectacle. When she glanced back, daring him to look away, he didn't. He smiled, just slightly, like he'd found something he'd been hoping for without knowing what it was. Word spread fast. That rich cowboy was watching Lila. Wonder what he wants with her. He'll learn soon enough. Lila heard it all and rolled her shoulders like shrugging off rain. She'd been a lesson before, a phase, a regret. She'd learned not to hope for more. That night, she rode again, faster than usual, pushing Dust hard along the ridge where the land dropped away into shadow. The sky burned red and gold, and the wind roared in her ears. She told herself the tightness in her chest was nothing, just another day, another stranger. But when she slowed at the crest and looked back toward the town lights flickering below, she saw a lone rider standing still, horse calm beneath him, watching the same sky. Caleb Hart didn't chase her. He didn't call her name. He just watched, as if he understood that some things couldn't be approached head-on. Lila turned Dust away, heart pounding harder than the ride demanded. She didn't know it yet, but something had shifted. The town might have decided who she was, but for the first time in a long while. Someone new was seeing her, not as a warning, not as a rumor, but as a possibility. Part 2. Caleb Hart did something no one else ever had. He left Lila alone without leaving her unseen. Days passed after that first quiet exchange on the ridge, and he didn't come knocking at her shack or corner her in the saloon with smooth words and practiced charm. Instead, he let life place them in the same spaces, as if trusting time to do what force never could. When she rode into town for supplies, he'd be there already, talking business with the store owner, his attention shifting to her only long enough to tip his hat. No lingering stare, no claim, just acknowledgement. It irritated her more than outright pursuit would have. Lila was used to men who tried to rope her fast, compliments flung like lariats, promises made too soon, tempers flaring when she didn't fall into line. Caleb did none of that. He listened when she spoke, even when her words were sharp. When she challenged him, questioned his money, his motives, his polished manners, he answered honestly or admitted when he didn't know. It left her without footing. You couldn't push against someone who refused to push back. Their first real conversation happened over a broken fence. One of Caleb's hired hands had abandoned a section after a spooked horse snapped the posts. Lila saw it while riding past and stopped out of habit. She was setting the last post when Caleb appeared, sleeves rolled, hands already dirty. He didn't ask for help or thank her too eagerly. He worked beside her in silence until the fence stood straight again. "You didn't have to," he said finally. "I know," she replied, not looking at him. He smiled at that, like it pleased him more than it should have. After that, he began to invite her, not demand, not expect. A ride to check a distant pasture. A late supper at his spread with no talk of contracts or expectations. She said no more than she said yes, testing whether the invitation would turn into pressure. It never did. When she didn't show, he didn't ask why. When she did, he treated her presence like a gift, not a victory. Lila tested him in other ways too. She mocked his fine clothes until he showed up in worn denim the next time. She challenged him to race along the creek at dusk, pushing her horse hard, expecting him to fall back. He kept pace, not trying to beat her, just matching her stride until she laughed despite herself. She disappeared for 2 days without word, then returned to find no anger waiting, only Caleb, quietly repairing a gate near her place, as if he'd always planned to be there. The town noticed. Of course it did. Whispers sharpened into bets. How long before he tired of her? How long before she ruined him? Lila felt those eyes like burrs on her skin and bristled. More than once, she warned Caleb off in her own rough way. "You don't want what comes with me," she said one night, staring into the fire at his place, sparks snapping into the dark. "I don't belong anywhere long." Caleb didn't reach for her. He didn't swear loyalty or make promises meant to soothe. "I'm not trying to own you," he said simply. "I just want to know you. As long as you'll let me." That honesty cracked something she'd built thick over the years. She wasn't used to men who didn't need her to be smaller, quieter, easier. Caleb didn't try to tame her fire. He stepped close enough to feel its warmth without asking it to die. Slowly, without realizing when it began, Lila found herself watching for him. Listening for the sound of his horse among others. Not because she felt trapped, but because she felt steady. When the town's whispers grew cruel, Caleb stood beside her, silent but solid, a presence that said she didn't have to fight every battle alone. She told herself it was temporary. Everything always was. But late one evening, as they rode back from the ridge under a sky bruised with coming rain, Lila realized something had changed. For the first time, the thought of staying, of choosing someone who chose her without trying to change her, didn't feel like surrender. It felt like trust. Part 3. The storm came in hard and fast, the way trouble often does, without warning and with no care for what it uproots. The sky darkened by late afternoon, clouds rolling in thick and low, bruised purple and gray. Lila felt it before she saw it, a restless pull in her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. She was out near the ridge again, checking on dust, when the first crack of thunder split the air, sharp enough to make the ground seem to flinch. She should have headed home. Instead, she rode toward Caleb's spread, rain already starting to fall in heavy, cold drops. By the time she reached his gate, the storm was in full fury, wind howling, rain slashing sideways, lightning tearing open the sky. Caleb was there, of course, soaked through, struggling to secure a loose section of fencing before the wind could rip it free. "You're going to get struck," she shouted over the roar. "So are you," he shot back, grinning like the danger only sharpened his focus. They worked together in the chaos, hands numb, muscles burning, until the fence held. Then another bolt of lightning lit the land white, followed by thunder so close it rattled Lila's bones. Without thinking, she grabbed Caleb's hand and pulled him toward the barn. He followed, not hesitating, their boots sliding in the mud as rain chased them inside. The barn was dark and loud with the storm pounding the roof. Dust stamped nervously in his stall, and Lila moved to calm him, pressing her forehead to the horse's warm neck. That's when it hit her, the fear she'd never named. Not of the storm, but of what it meant to care, to need, to risk being left behind when the sky cleared. Another thunderclap shook the barn. Lila sucked in a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Caleb stood close now, close enough that she could feel his warmth through soaked clothes. He didn't touch her until she reached for him again, fingers tightening around his sleeve like an anchor. "I don't do this," she said, voice raw. "I don't need saving." "I know," Caleb said softly. "I'm not here to save you." Something in that, his refusal to play hero, his certainty, broke through the last wall she'd built. Lila turned to him, rainwater running down her face, unsure where the storm ended and her tears began. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. When his palm cupped her cheek, it wasn't possession she felt. It was recognition. "I've been wild because it was safer," she whispered. "If no one could keep me, no one could leave." Caleb rested his forehead against hers, the world reduced to thunder and breath. "You don't have to choose me," he said. "But I'm choosing you, every day." Storm or calm. Outside, the rain eased, thunder rolling farther away. Inside, something settled. Lila let herself lean into him, just a little at first, testing whether the ground would give way. It didn't. His arms came around her, not tight, not trapping, just enough to hold. When the storm finally passed, they stepped out into air washed clean. The land glittered under a breaking sky, sunlight spilling through torn clouds. Lila expected the old panic to return, the urge to run, to reclaim her distance. Instead, she felt clear. The town saw them together more after that, saw Lila ride in beside Caleb, her chin high, her fire intact. Some whispered that the rich cowboy had finally tamed her. Lila heard it and laughed, the sound just as sharp and bright as ever. They were wrong. Caleb hadn't tamed her. He'd given her a place where she didn't have to be wild just to survive. And when she took his hand in front of the whole town, fingers lacing, grip sure, it wasn't surrender. It was choice, and that, Lila knew, was the truest freedom she'd ever had.